Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Hey there, Captain G.
What's up, my brother?
How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. How you doing? I love our favorite table,
I know.
Sober.Coffee.
Yep, it's a place to be.
So what's going on?
Resentments today.
I know it.
Hey, how about a little housekeeping before we jump into resentments?
Oh, let me get ready.
Because I don't want to be resentful of the fact that we don't tell people that they can get a hold of us in multiple avenues, which I think it's on the beginning and end of the podcast, right? But Glenn, I know we get a lot of communication on specifically from Instagram and a lot from Twitter. So just good ways to get in touch with us. And we love ideas. We love guests. And we love hearing your stories. And we love doing anything we can to help you out. But how do people specifically get a hold of us?
So let me jump in with a laundry list of ways by land, air, and sea. So Instagram is Sober.Coffee Podcast. We have a number of followers on there. On Twitter, it's at Sober.Coffee Pod. We also have an anonymous sober account at Stay Sober Today on Twitter. And our email is podcast at Sober.Coffee.
I was contacted by a guy this week who said he's got a website that we could buy from him. It's called lastcall.com.
You know what? I think I know that guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fantastic
Is that a good
website.
idea? I know,
Totally
right?
is.
Last call.
I think it's great.
I'm so grateful I had my last call.
I know. That's awesome. All right. So are we really talking about resentments?
I know, right?
Man, way to stick it.
Yeah, don't resent me for that.
No, it's a real topic, but it's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I will let you kick it off.
Well,
Because, by the way, I have some notes here. I'm ready.
I know. It's so funny. I mean, I'm sitting in front of you, and you've got like 3 pieces of paper in front of you.
I know.
And
I'm
thinking like 8 years ago, you would have had like the liquor ads all spawned out in front of you. Now you got documentation on resentments and what it does to you. But I'll kick it off by quoting the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book on page 145. It says, greatest enemies of alcoholics and addicts is resentment, jealousy, envy, frustration, and fear. On page 64, it says, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. And then followed up on page 66, it says, the business of resentment is infinitely grave. I mean, they're serious about resentments and what it does to sobriety or the lack thereof.
Right. And I'd like to point out on page 64, kind of continue that sentence because I had that highlighted also. It says, destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. And when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So I also wrote down about resentments because that's a tough word. I lived a lot of resentments for years, and we'll talk about that. But it's, quote unquote, bitter indignation or a negative reaction to being mistreated. And I'd like to add, you know me, I don't like to add words to stuff.
Okay,
but I think I think it's good to point out, our negative reaction to perceived
Oh, right. There you
mistreatment.
go. Yeah.
Because not all the time. I mean, sometimes it's, all in our head, right? It's not reality. Perception, not reality.
Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, Glenn, perception is a person's reality. Yeah. If they don't embrace what the truth is or what the exact circumstances, or they don't accept the scenario for what it is, then yes, they can certainly veer off on a course of.
Do you think in sobriety that people get a better view of reality versus emotional perception?
It takes time, I think. It took me time anyway.
I mean, I didn't have that down on my notes, but as you were talking, I'm just sitting there thinking, my perception was really whacked out when I was drinking, and even in early sobriety. I mean, my head was all over the place, and I think that's one of the things that's evened out, right? That I have a pretty good ability today of looking in the mirror and self-awareness, self-perception, looking at situations, and I've used some tools, over time.
Yeah, and I think that's encouraging for both the newcomer who's just beginning to explore their real feelings and somebody who's got a little sobriety underneath. I think it's encouraging for them to know that this is a process. It's there is no point for I can only speak for myself. There was no point where I'm like, I get it. And now I've got a emotional sobriety. It's a journey, because there are always things riling up on me. I resent the guy for cutting in front of me, and then we had the green, and then he cut in front of me, and now I don't have the green. Now I got the yellow.
They stopped.
They stopped, of course, because there was a red light camera there.
All right, so let me ask you this. What fuels resentments? How do resentments start?
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I mean, I think with your senses, right? I mean, you're seeing something, you're hearing something. In some cases, you're smelling something, and I can't put that into application, but
don't even try.
Right, but you're seeing something, you're hearing something, and right away you're processing it through your filter. And where I feel you've gone wrong is because you're at a fork in the road, and you're either going to process it as taking it personally, like it's some kind of personal assault on you and your pride and your ego and everything that drives you, or you're going to say, all right, acceptance. And that's the one thing, when it comes to resentments, I think the opposite of resentments is acceptance. That's just how I've learned this program. I think acceptance is the key to overcoming the resentment. But your question was, how does it start? I think it starts with a process that we've developed over years of our life, right? Because we were maybe wronged as a kid in this area. And so furthermore, as you go down the road, you feel resentments. You're harboring something that ultimately started in your youth. Does that make any sense?
Right, yeah. So I don't really have any specific answers. I was just, this is one of those parts of the show we're just exploring, right?
Oh, thanks.
I mean, sometimes we don't have, we're just digging in the dirt, if you will. But I think there's two things, as I look at my resentments, right? And I try to think of, I don't resent too much these days, but I can think of some good ones that I have had. And I looked at what the fuel was, right? What got those going? What kept them going? What kept them alive? And I looked at two things. Well, really three things, but it could be two things. Ego and selfishness drove a lot of my resentments. That was some good fuel for some good resentments I had. And the second word would be expectations. So when I have expectations of situations or people mostly, right? And I expect Betty to, perform in one way or another, or to do ABC, and she doesn't, right? Then I get bent, and I start going sideways. I start, germinating those resentments. Or if I'm focused on what Glenn wants and Glenn's not getting what Glenn wants, that's pretty fertile soil for resentments also. So let me ask you this: what was one or two or three of your biggest resentments? I'm
going to start with self.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I'm going to start.
Wait, you're going to start with self?
Yeah, I'm going to start with
mine.
Self. Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. I mean, the biggest bundle of resentments I came into this program with was the resentments to myself for decisions I had made. And, look, I mean, I wasn't a staggering drunk 24/7 a day, but I was affected.
22 too.
Yeah, right, exactly. A man's got to pass out, So,
awesome.
But so I had to process as I was getting sober all the things that I had done because of my alcohol addiction, and that went into the business life, the family life. And so I had to start with self. So I would say that's the biggest thing for me, was uncovering and then forgiving myself, drunk Mike, and allowing sober Mike to flourish.
I totally get that, because I had the exact same answer. I resented myself, and that brings up all those other fun words, self-loathing, right. Hate, regret, remorse, all those, fun words. And then when I was thinking about resentment, so I was getting ready for today, I was thinking about resentments. What I realized is, I'm focusing on somebody else's behavior, not mine. So if I'm resenting you for something, instead of looking for me and what role I play and how I own it, and hey, maybe I am asking too much, right? Or maybe I'm being selfish. I'm just looking at your behavior and how that's impacting me, right? And then also, I've heard a lot of people say when they're dealing with resentment, it's almost, again, that's looking at you instead of looking at me. It's like, I'm drinking the poison. I'm letting the resentments. You're smiling because you.
I love that line.
Yeah, no,
you're drinking the poison, hoping I'm going to die.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wishing you the worst while I'm drinking the poison. Meanwhile, it's crushing me even more.
Right.
Right. And we'll touch in a second how to deal with resentments. But the one thing, and I've worked with some guys. In fact, I worked with a guy recently. And he relapsed about 6 months ago. Right. And he relapsed because of resentments that he had with his wife. And I'm like, dude, what were you thinking? He goes, well, I just wanted to drink because I said, I'll show her. I'm like, well, how'd it work out for you?
Yeah.
Like how'd that work? And he's like, well, it didn't work out very well. Right. So again, that was a good example of I'm drinking the poison and hoping it hurts her. Meanwhile, it hurt everything.
I was about 19 years old, and I was coming home from a late night at the $1.50 an hour or $1.50 a pitcher bar. And I got pulled over. And I thought,
That's
the
awesome.
audacity, I'm rushing home to get into bed. So I hopped out of my car.
I'm rushing home so they don't catch me driving drunk.
So the lights come flashing behind me. I hop out of the car, start screaming at the cop for pulling me over. Now, how do you think that worked out for me?
One set of handcuffs or two?
Just one. On a small frame.
Oh, man.
So let's talk about how to deal with them. Because I think everyone's got them, and every day is an opportunity to get more. So, tell me how you learn to process resentments so that they don't become a number one offender for you.
Well, I think the first thing is, through the program of AA, I have learned how to avoid resentments. I've learned how to focus on myself less, so less ego, less selfishness. Think about others, right? And become selfless more. Well, that certainly made sense. So I have less resentments to deal with. So, less fires to put out. Then, part of the program is page 86. At night, reflect on your day. Right. So if I have some things go sideways through the day, if I don't catch it in real time, and I'm pretty good at catching things in real time now, then I catch them at night when I retire at night on page 86 of the blue big book. Right. And I reflect on my day and I'm like, hey, who did I hurt? Who hurt me? What am I bent about anything or anybody? And it easily pops up. It rarely goes the next day where I don't realize something, right? So then I have the capability. They have this thing called a cell phone and text, and I reach out to people, and I try to resolve stuff. And the people that are in my world today know I live this way. So if they get a text from me saying, hey, man, I'm sorry I went sideways today, or I answered you too short, or hey, man, I'm just reaching out. You kind of went sideways on me, right? Here's what I'm thinking, right? And recently I had to have a tough conversation with a guy dealing with resentments because I was really starting to resent him. And it went great because he knows me and he's in the program. I hang out with a lot of sober people, right? So it was almost like we were laughing. Oh, yeah, I get it, right? But there's a couple of things, one is, and one of the things that I try to do is feed positive emotions, right? So, in my mind, when I wake up, when I deal with situations through the day, I can go negative or I can go positive, and I choose most times to go the positive route.
Mm-hmm.
And I feed that positive one, right? So I try to avoid. I try to avoid, and I can't come up with the term here on the top of my head, but just the playing it over and over and over, the negativity. They did this. They did this. They did this.
Right, so you nip it in the bud.
Yeah, I try to have good head speak.
Yeah.
To talk to my head trash.
Right.
To tell it to calm down.
Right. How many voices you got going on up there?
I don't know. Doctor said 7, but
all right.
I don't know. Or was that 7 personalities? I'm not sure. So another one, I know you like this one, so I'll let you jump in, is journaling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't journal. I probably should. That's something I'll add next year.
Yeah, I think for me, journaling has been 2 things. First of all, it's a bucket for all the nuggets of knowledge that I pick up living this sober life, and they're just everywhere. And they happen in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, but they happen outside. They happen as I'm talking to you. They happen as I'm out in the world. If you just look for the nuggets of wisdom that are going to make life a better place to live. So that's the one reason I use journaling. The second reason I do is just to put things out in black and white in front of me, because then just the facts end up there, just the facts, not the emotion, just the facts.
Yeah, facts are great. The emotion can send it really sideways, really. And then a couple other thoughts are, 12-step programming, our AA program, our 12-step program really, helps to identify and diffuse resentments. And part of that is that word acceptance. Accept how things are. You don't need to control everything in life. They were the old days, right? I also think meditation, right, and having a spiritual connection just helps me to calm down, get outside of myself, right? And I hate to use this term because I'm not even sure if I really understand it, but give it up to God, right? Don't worry about it. Let it just keeps rolling. Just put it out there in the universe. I call my sponsor on stuff, and it's funny because I should almost call him a resentment diffuser, because I'll call him up and I got a good resentment just starting. I mean, it is just starting to catch roots, and I can tell it's going to be a really good one. And I'll call him up. He goes, "Who the fuck cares?
Yeah, right.
Like, what are you doing? That's none of your business. What are you doing? Don't, And I'm telling you, he can dissect the resentment in 30 seconds.
Well, I got a guy.
You got a guy too?
I got a guy. Yeah. And my sponsor, first thing on the phone, like my house could be burning down. I could be calling him to find out if I should grab the fire extinguisher or 911 first, right? Because I'm looking for direction. His first question, "Hey, Mike, any new resentments? Any new resentments?" And he calls me out.
Using that. That
he calls me
really
out
good.
At the beginning of every single call that I have with him. Any new resentments?
Do you ever say yes?
Every day. Every day.
Do you really?
No.
You shouldn't resent me that much.
Yeah, right. No, but I'll tell you, and that's a good segue, because having a sponsor that takes you through, and first of all, let me backtrack here. Now my caffeine's kicking in, but page 86 in our resource room. So there's a link to page 86, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. You want to buy a copy? It's in our resource room. Click on the link and it'll take you to Amazon. The ex-Mrs. Bezos will be very happy that you spent that money. But here's the thing, the 4-step, Glenn. For me, that was the linchpin of learning how to process. If you do a 4-step right and specifically the way it's laid out in the book, and do it by columns, and you do it the right way, in the far right-hand column, ask the question, what was your role in this? And when you start to blend that, it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe Betty wasn't all wrong. Maybe
that's that ownership piece.
I had a role in that.
Stop looking at them and look at you, right?
That's right.
No, that's step 4. And by the way,
I've
seen some people working on step 4 lately. They're really struggling with it. I'm not sure if it's a seasonal thing or what, but it's worth digging in and getting through it.
It is absolutely probably the hardest homework assignment I ever had in my life, and the only one I really scored an A on.
Man, give me bumps for that, man.
Yeah,
that was awesome. That was awesome. And hey, one last thing is, I think of that guy that said, "Oh, I'll show her," and and I relapsed, right? There's a big price for relapse. I mean, it really is. And I'm not trying to beat people up because they relapsed. I relapsed 100 times, right? At least.
Right.
And there's 3 stages of relapse, but relapse can be dangerous. I mean, there's people that we know, and we've gone to their funerals.
That's right. They didn't make it.
Because of relapses. So, when I think there's 3 stages of relapse. There's emotional, that's kind of the uneasiness, and I think resentments really play in that emotional part, right? And then I think the mental is when you start, objectifying having that drink, and you're like, oh man, that drink would, I'll show her, right? That's almost the mental. And I'll go down to the liquor store right now and I'll buy it and I'll have it drank by the time that's more of a mental, right? And then the actual physical is when you take a drink. And I think, resentments can be dangerous, just as we started out,
That's right. The number one offender.
The number one offender. But there's some ways to combat resentments. There's ways to live so that you don't pile them up, right? And when they do come, there's ways to dissect them and diffuse.
Yeah. I love it.
Dissect and
diffuse.
Let's trademark that one.
Let's descend.
All right. So less resentments, more peaceful living.
Yep. Love it.
I think that's a good summary.
All right, man.
All right, brother. Let's have less resentments.
All right. We'll talk to you next week.
Love you, man. Take care, brother.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.